What happens when Hollywood's most respected legend comes face to face with late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Robert De Niro sits down with Bill Maher for what was supposed to be a standard promotional appearance that turned into an absolute nightmare. Last night's episode of Real Time became the most explosive confrontation in the show's history, and the internet is still buzzing about what went down. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans clash in the most dramatic fashion possible. The tension was palpable from the moment Robert De Niro walked onto the Real Time set. The legendary actor, known for his intense performances and passionate political views, carried himself with that familiar De Niro intensity that has captivated audiences for decades. But last night, that intensity was about to be unleashed in a way no one saw coming. Bill Maher, ever the provocateur, opened the interview with his trademark smug grin and immediately set the tone with a comment that would prove to be the first crack in what would become a complete breakdown. "So Bobby," Maher began, already using the diminutive form of De Niro's name in what seemed like a calculated move to establish dominance, "you've been pretty vocal about your political opinions lately. Some might say you've become more of an activist than an actor these days." De Niro's jaw tightened visibly, his eyes narrowing as he processed what was clearly meant as a backhanded compliment. The camera caught every micro-expression on the actor's weathered face, and viewers could sense immediately that this wasn't going to be another softball celebrity interview. "I've always had opinions, Bill," De Niro replied, his voice measured but carrying an unmistakable edge. "The difference is now I'm not afraid to share them when I see what's happening to this country." Maher leaned back in his chair with that insufferable knowing look he's famous for, the kind of expression that suggests he's already 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. "Right, but don't you think there's a line? I mean, when you're calling former presidents names and getting up at award shows to rant about politics, aren't you worried you're alienating half your audience?" The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon, and De Niro's response came with the kind of controlled fury that only a master actor could deliver. "You know what alienates me, Bill? People who sit back and make jokes while democracy is under attack. People who think everything's a fucking punchline." The profanity landed like a thunderbolt, and the studio audience, which had been politely chuckling at Maher's setup, fell into an uncomfortable silence. But Maher, never one to back down from controversy, doubled down with a comment that would prove to be the match that lit the fuse. "Oh, come on, Bob. Democracy under attack? Don't you think that's a little dramatic, even for you? You've played tough guys in movies for so long. Maybe you're starting to believe your own characters." The insult was delivered with Maher's signature blend of condescension and fake reasonableness, but it landed like a slap in the face to one of cinema's most respected figures. De Niro's hands visibly clenched on the arms of his chair, and his voice dropped to that dangerous whisper that moviegoers know usually precedes an explosion. "Are you fucking serious right now? You think this is some kind of performance?" The atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. What had started as typical Maher provocation was rapidly escalating into something far more personal and volatile. The camera operators scrambled to capture every angle of what was clearly becoming an unprecedented moment in late-night television history. Maher, seemingly oblivious to how far he'd already pushed one of Hollywood's most formidable personalities, pressed forward with the kind of reckless confidence that had made him famous and frequently controversial. "Look, I get it. You're passionate. But when you're up there screaming about fascism and comparing politicians to gangsters, don't you see how that looks? You're Robert De Niro, not some political pundit." De Niro leaned forward, his intense gaze boring into Maher with the kind of stare that had intimidated countless co-stars and directors over his legendary career. "And you're Bill Maher, not some fucking authority on what I should or shouldn't say about my own country. You sit here every week making cute little observations while real people suffer the consequences of the shit you laugh about." The words cut through the studio like a blade, and even Maher seemed to realize he had awakened something dangerous. But instead of backing down, he made the fatal mistake of smirking, that trademark Maher expression of superiority that suggested he found De Niro's anger amusing rather than legitimate. It was a miscalculation that would prove to be the point of no return in what was about to become the most explosive confrontation in late-night television history. That smirk was the spark that ignited a firestorm nobody saw coming. De Niro's eyes flashed with a fury that transcended mere disagreement. This was personal now, and everyone in that studio could feel the temperature rise as two of the most formidable personalities in entertainment prepared for an all-out war of words that would leave one of them completely humiliated. The moment Maher's lips curved into that condescending smile, something snapped inside Robert De Niro. The legendary actor who had portrayed some of cinema's most volatile characters was about to channel every ounce of that intensity into a real-life confrontation that would make his movie performances look tame by comparison. "You think this is funny?" De Niro's voice rose, no longer the controlled whisper of a seasoned professional, but the raw emotion of a man who had reached his absolute breaking point. Maher, still wearing that insufferable grin, made his second catastrophic mistake of the evening. "Honestly, Bob, you're getting a little worked up over nothing. This is what happens when actors try to play politician, you lose perspective." The dismissive wave of his hand that accompanied these words was like pouring gasoline on an already raging fire. The studio audience, which had been shifting uncomfortably in their seats, now sat in stunned silence as they witnessed something unprecedented unfold before their eyes. This wasn't scripted television drama, this was real, raw, and escalating by the second. Camera operators scrambled to capture every angle of what was clearly becoming a career-defining moment for both men. Though neither realized yet just how far this confrontation would go, De Niro stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, with a sound that seemed to echo through the suddenly hushed studio. At 79 years old, the actor still possessed the physical presence that had made him one of cinema's most intimidating figures. And now that presence was focused entirely on the talk show host who had pushed him too far. "You arrogant piece of shit," De Niro snarled, pointing directly at Maher. "You sit there every week thinking you're the smartest guy in the room, making your little jokes while the world burns around us." Maher's smirk finally began to falter as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. This wasn't going according to his usual playbook of provocative banter followed by eventual reconciliation. The look in De Niro's eyes suggested this had moved far beyond the realm of television entertainment into something much more dangerous and unpredictable. "Bob, maybe we should," Maher began, but he was immediately cut off by a verbal assault that left him speechless. "No, Bill, you don't get to control this conversation anymore," De Niro interrupted, his voice now carrying the full weight of decades of frustration with people like Maher. "You invited me on your show? You want to play games with me? Let's fucking play." The profanity hit the censors like a series of bombs, but De Niro was past caring about network standards or professional courtesy. The transformation was complete. The respected actor who had walked onto the set just minutes earlier had been replaced by something far more primal and dangerous. This was Robert De Niro unleashed, channeling every ounce of the intensity that had made him a legend. But now it was directed at a real target who had foolishly provoked him beyond all reason. Maher, finally beginning to grasp the severity of his situation, attempted damage control with the kind of nervous laugh that suggested he was realizing this interview had spiraled completely out of his control. "Look, I think we're both getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a breath and—" "A breath?" De Niro's voice cracked like a whip. "You spend 5 minutes insulting my integrity, my career, my beliefs, and now you want me to take a fucking breath? You think you can just dismiss me like some wannabe actor looking for attention?" The fury in his voice was building to a crescendo that promised an even more explosive climax was coming. The studio had become a powder keg, with De Niro as the lit fuse rapidly approaching the explosive payload of his legendary temper. Every person in that room could sense that something unprecedented was about to happen, something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. This was no longer just a talk show interview gone wrong, this was a complete meltdown between two titans of their respective fields, and only one of them was going to emerge with their dignity intact. What happened next would go down as the most devastating verbal destruction in television history. A moment where Hollywood royalty absolutely annihilated a talk show host who had finally bitten off more than he could chew. The explosion that followed would leave Bill Maher's reputation in ruins and cement Robert De Niro's status as someone you simply do not mess with. Maher, sweating now and clearly panicking as he watched his show disintegrate before his eyes, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. "Bob, I respect your passion, but maybe we can agree to disagree and move on to. But De Niro wasn't having any of it. The actor had reached the point of no return, and what came next was a masterclass in how to completely destroy someone using nothing but words and righteous fury. Respect my passion? De Niro's voice dropped to a menacing growl that made the entire studio hold its breath. You don't respect shit, Bill. You're a fucking coward who hides behind your jokes because you're too scared to take a real stand on anything that matters. You think you're edgy? You think you're brave? You're nothing but a privileged little bitch who's never had to fight for anything in your entire life. The words hit Maher like physical blows, each insult delivered with surgical precision designed to cut as deeply as possible. The talk show host's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, anger, humiliation, and finally, something approaching genuine fear as he realized he was completely outmatched by a man who had decades of experience channeling raw human emotion. De Niro wasn't finished. The dam had burst, and years of pent-up frustration with people like Maher came pouring out in a torrent of devastating truth. You want to know what's really pathetic about you, Bill? You've built an entire career on being the guy who says what others won't, but when it comes down to it, you're just another Hollywood phony. You criticize actors for speaking out, but what the fuck have you ever done besides sit behind this desk and throw stones? The studio audience was now witnessing something they'd never seen before, a complete and total dismantling of their host by someone who clearly had no intention of playing by the usual celebrity interview rules. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was an execution. And De Niro was the executioner. Maher tried one more feeble comeback, his voice cracking with the strain of trying to maintain some semblance of control. Look, I think you're taking this way too personally. But De Niro cut him off with a gesture so dismissive and contemptuous that it was clear the interview was over. Taking it personally? De Niro laughed. But it was a sound completely devoid of humor, cold and bitter. You invited me here to mock me, to diminish me, to treat me like some washed-up has-been who doesn't know his place. Well, here's your reality check, you smug piece of shit. I'm Robert fucking De Niro. I've been making movies since before you were even a punchline on cable access television. The legendary actor began moving toward the edge of the interview area, but he wasn't done delivering his final, devastating verdict. You know what the difference is between you and me, Bill? When I'm gone, people will remember my work, my contributions to cinema, the characters I brought to life. But you'll just be remembered as the asshole who thought he was smarter than everyone else until someone finally called him on his bullshit. Maher sat frozen in his chair, completely speechless for perhaps the first time in his career. The man who made his living with words had been rendered utterly mute by an actor who had just delivered the performance of a lifetime, not in a movie, but in real life, and at Maher's own expense. But De Niro had saved the best for last. He stopped at the edge of the set, turned back to face the humiliated host, and delivered the coup de grace that would be replayed millions of times across social media. And one more thing, Bill. Next time you want to fuck with someone, make sure they give a damn about your little TV show. Because I sure as hell don't. With that, Robert De Niro ripped off his microphone, threw it on the floor, and walked off the set with the kind of swagger that only comes from knowing you've just delivered the most epic takedown in television history. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the stunned silence as he disappeared backstage, leaving behind a shell-shocked host and an audience that had just witnessed the complete destruction of Bill Maher's authority. The camera lingered on Maher's face for several excruciating seconds, capturing every moment of his humiliation for posterity. The man who had spent years dishing out cutting remarks and condescending commentary had just been served a helping of his own medicine by a master of the craft, and the result was devastating. That was the moment Bill Maher learned that some legends are legends for a reason, and Robert De Niro had just reminded everyone exactly why you don't mess with cinematic royalty. The show continued after an awkward commercial break. But everyone knew the real story had already been written in those explosive minutes, when a Hollywood icon showed a talk show host what real power looks like.